Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're discussing one of the best family-friendly ski resorts in all of North America, Park City. Because the mountain is mammoth, this episode is split into 4 parts, with the first 2 about the Park City side, and this part wrapping up our discussion of the canyon side we began in Part C. If you haven't already, be sure to check out Part C to get some valuable background information about the canyon side. With that, let's finish an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Park City. We'll pick up right where we left off in Part C, at the Red Pine Lodge. Now, from Red Pine Lodge, lots of people want to get to this big area to the looker's left side of canyons. There are 2 ways to get there, but unfortunately, both routes require taking the same run, which is arguably the worst run on the entire canyon side, Chicane. Chicane is fairly wide and fairly mellow, but it genuinely feels like skiing down an interstate highway. You can jump off Chicane onto the Chicane Bypass, signed as Tombstone Alley in person. This is just a road, but it gets you around the chicane traffic. Where it intersects Cloud 9, it's not signed, but be sure to continue across, because if you go left onto Cloud 9, you'll end up right back on chicane. Lower chicane is also a little bit flat, just to pile onto this already dreaded run. I would highly recommend avoiding both chicane and chicane bypass as much as possible. If you survive the run down, you'll come to a compact and crowded little area. The main lift here is, of course, the Tombstone Express, which we'll come back to in a second. If you hike across a little bit, you can get to Timberline, which is one of 2 ways to get over to the southern half of canyons. Timberline is a 2-way lift, so be aware of traffic unloading as well. You can also take Over and Out, which is my recommendation for getting back to the base area. Down here is the Tombstone barbecue joint, which is one of my favorite places to grab lunch on mountain. The Tombstone Express is a major choke point. There's no better way to put it. It's effectively the silver load of the canyon side, as you have to ride it to get to 9990 and Peak 5, it serves some good terrain itself, and it's a major piece of the egress from some other mountain areas. If you're returning from Iron Mountain, Dreamcatcher, Dreamscape, Daybreak, Peak 5, or the Park City side via the Quicksilver Gondola, you'll get dropped at Tombstone. Remember that you have Over and Out as an option, and later in the day, while Tombstone may be super busy, heading to Orange Bubble and that side of the mountain may not be nearly as bad. But of course, that doesn't address the fantastic terrain that Tombstone directly serves, so let's go ahead and get to that now. We already discussed chicane, but if for some sick reason you want to lap it, you have a few options. By far the easiest is Red Pine Road, which can require some skating on slower days. For access back to this Red Pine Lodge area, I much prefer Sidewinder, which is an awesome black that gets rotating grooming along with sister run Cloud 9. Both of these are pretty steep, but are fantastic cruising laps when groomed. While they are quite popular, they never feel too crowded, and they each have a nice consistent pitch. Between Sidewinder and Red Pine Road is an experts-only area consisting of Grande and Deschutes. Grande has some pretty sparse trees and might seem easy initially, but it has a pretty big cliff band halfway down you'll need to work through or around. Deschutes is a super underrated area, consisting of multiple tree chutes hidden in the woods. These are super flowy and nice and long, and because they're hidden in the woods, they tend to keep some pretty good snow as well. If you're already on Red Pine Road from Tombstone or the backside of 9990, you can access Pinball Alley. It's a fairly mellow natural gully that's plenty wide and fairly short. It's far from the most exhilarating run around. Down towards the bottom of Sidewinder, you have the option to take Encore. Encore is certainly the road less taken, and it typically has a nice little mogul field at the end. Parallel to Cloud 9 is Escapade Woods, a nice gladed area that flows down into a gentle natural gully. Beware that you can't really exit it until it intersects Tombstone Alley, so be sure you're ready to descend all that vertical before you commit. To access Cloud 9 and Sidewinder, you'll need to make a U-turn off the unload ramp and then keep left at the fork. If you keep right at the fork, you'll head to Diamond Ridge and Paradise. Both forks are pretty flat, short roads that get you to the tops of the true runs. Diamond Ridge honestly would be a blue were it not for one steep pitch. It has moguls, but it's super mellow for the most part. It does make for a great cardio run, however. If you go right down under the lift or drop off the uppermost part of Cloud 9, you'll head down this big moguled bowl. If you drop off the left of Diamond Ridge, you'll be in the Paradise Chutes. These are not true chutes, but are called that because they resemble tree chutes from afar. They're not the steepest nor too technical, so the only limiting factor is they're relatively narrow. Opposite the Paradise Chutes is a face containing thunder and lightning, which gets a ton of sun. If conditions are good, however, they offer some nice thin glades. All of this will drop you into a runout that takes you to another world. If you choose to continue in the bowl below that road, you will have a pretty nasty creek crossing to contend with in spots, so be careful. Far and away the most popular option off the top of Tombstone is to head in the direction of Another World. Another World is an absolutely classic blue cruiser, albeit just a touch steep and icy on its first pitch. It is, however, immensely popular, so I would highly recommend hitting it first thing in the morning. Partway down the ridge, you'll have the option to keep right to South Fork, which is just a road that continues down the ridge just a bit before switching back to rejoin Another World. It does, however, offer access to the steep cruiser, the Drop, and its less crazy counterpart, Tranquility. Tranquility is only a black because of one semi-steep pitch that goes into a fairly tight curve. Its vibe matches its name, that being tranquil, and I do enjoy it more than Another World or the Drop. Contrary to how it appears on the trail map, you cannot get to South Fork, and thus the Drop and Tranquility, from Diamond Ridge. Off the top of Tombstone, you can take Silver Spur, a decently pitched road, to get to Peak 5 and 9990. The bottom of the two lifts are a decent little skate apart, so make sure you know where you want to go before you go, so you don't accidentally end up at the wrong one and have to hike all the way back to the other. Alternatively, you can take rips off from Another World, which is a cute little groomer through the colony, but I would only recommend that if you're going to 9990, as it drops you a ways from Peak 5. The 9990 Express really feels like the Grouse Mountain Express at Beaver Creek to me, for those of you who know that area. It mostly consists of double black mogul runs, although there are some gnarlier lines spread throughout, unlike at Beaver Creek. Let's start over on this backside with the Red Pine Chutes. To access this area, there's a pretty prominent traverse you can take. If you drop in right after crossing the ridgeline, you'll be on Magic Line. Keep going a bit until the trees thin a little bit for Charlie Brown. Go all the way to the far boundary line for the Red Pine Chutes. Now, if you're picturing some big, long, rock-defined chute like this, today is not your lucky day, unfortunately. This whole area is relatively underwhelming, and while there are some short chutes, small cliffs, and the likes, it isn't all it's made out to be in my opinion. For the most part, it's more of just some intermittent tree skiing, some faces, and moguls here and there. There is lots of space to explore back here, but all of this will funnel you back to Red Pine Road and then back to Tombstone. As such, it's a 2-lift lap, and not an easy 2 lifts either. Thus, I typically save doing anything in this area until I'm ready to leave 9990. If you go down the ridge on the looker's right side but drop back into the lift serve side, you'll be headed down Dutch Hollow. Don't be fooled by the mild ridge, as it quickly drops into a super steep face that can be quite rocky in spots. A much easier line is Fright Gully, which is a pretty wide gully that has huge moguls all the way down. 94 turns is the most iconic line in the pod, and is accessed by a very short bout of sidestepping to the left of the unload ramp. This is a super wide face with legitimately Volkswagen-sized moguls. This is an absolute must-hit for all experts at canyons, despite it not being the craziest or most interesting run ever. Just lookers left of the lift, between 94 turns and Fright Gully, is another super steep face with small chutes, cliffs, straight lines, and the likes. I would say that this is the gnarliest area within the directly lift serve zone. The bottom of this zone and 94 turns gives you 3 options. Moraine and Aspen Grove are more of single black difficulty and are just classic trees mixed with some moguls here and there. Talus Garden starts off with more moguls like 94 turns, before opening up to this big open meadow. It's not really steep enough to develop moguls here. Then it crosses Escape and becomes a short, narrow natural gully that brings you to Peak 5. Off the top of the 9990 lift, you can also take a quick hike up to the true summit for access to a medium-sized face, or easier access to the backside chutes. I don't find it worth it for either purpose, to be honest. The next lift over from 9990 is Peak 5, which serves a little bit of extreme terrain in its own right. The abyss here looks like standard tree skiing from the top, but don't be fooled. It quickly develops into some of the gnarliest terrain in Park City, with a series of chutes ranging from Golden Broom to Geronimo, which you'll find signed in person by patrol. It is possible to avoid the chutes and stay in the trees by sticking to the skier's left side. However, you absolutely should not enter the abyss without due preparation to hit a chute, even if you're not planning on it. Abyss goes perpendicular down the skier's left side of the lift, but if you stay parallel to the lift on the skier's right side, you'll have some really good tree skiing. I would highly recommend checking out Mystic Pines, and I would much sooner recommend it than areas like Condor Woods, Tree Time, and Black Hole on the lower mountain. Also off of Peak 5, you have access to this spaghetti-looking mess of blues through the colony here. These runs get rotating grooming for the most part, but are taken care of enough not to get bumps. My favorite of these is Crowning Glory. All of these runs go through a rather affluent neighborhood, flanked by multi-million-dollar residences, all while dipping over and under the road network. The exception is Power Alley, which is more of a road that returns you to Peak 5. I find these runs super fun, as they're typically pretty quiet and they're super long, which is an added bonus for me. However, the major downside of Serenity and Everything Lookers Right is that they dump you back at Tombstone. That means they're 2 lift laps, which, while not the worst thing in the world, is more annoying than it could be. If you take Upper Harmony, Solace, or Royal, you can access these 3 lifts that form the backbone of the Southern Canyon's terrain. This is the most popular method, going Tombstone to Peak 5 to get to Dreamscape, but another good option is to take Timberline to Iron Mountain to get to Dreamcatcher. This route is useful when Tombstone has a big line. Let's start with the most underrated of these 3 lifts, Daybreak. Daybreak doesn't serve much terrain, but the blues that it does serve are some of the quietest in all of canyons. These 3 blues on the Looker's right of the pod get rotating grooming, but there's typically at least one route down that's not bumped up. The runs on the Looker's left are more consistently groomed. The other lift option from where Daybreak starts is Dreamscape. This lift gets a little bit busier than Daybreak, but typically doesn't exceed 5 minutes except on the busiest days. It is, unfortunately, a fixed grip, and is significantly longer than Daybreak. Its ride is typically in the ballpark of 10 minutes, which I personally can't stand a ton of laps on. Panorama is the easiest run in the pod, but it's effectively a glorified road for its entire length. All of these runs from Deja Vu through Snow Meadow are fantastic Blue Moogle runs, the best in all of Park City. Daydream is the busiest, so I avoid it. My favorite is Bliss, as you have to start down Deja Vu under the lift to access it, so it's somewhat hidden. Snow Meadow is the widest and mellowest, while McDonald's Meadow offers a super wide straight area to practice. There is good intermediate tree skiing between all the runs, and there are some more advanced level trees just past Snow Meadow. I'd like to point out Backstreet here, because while it may initially look like a nice quiet alternative to the busy Panorama runout, it is pretty flat in some places. Alpenglow goes right down the ridgeline and is pretty consistently groomed. However, it gets pretty narrow down here, and where Alpenglow and Panorama merge before the lift bottoms gets quite congested, so ski this area with caution. You cannot get to Dreamscape and Daybreak from Sleeper, even though it's real close on the map. Off of Alpenglow, you've got Twilight, Mirage, and Apparition, all of which are blue groomers that take you to the Dreamcatcher quad. Be careful, as you cannot get to Dreamcatcher directly from the bottom of Dreamscape. You must ride up Dreamscape in order to access Alpenglow first. Now, if you thought Dreamscape's ride time was bad, Dreamcatcher has a base ride time of 10 minutes plus near constant stops and slows, which often takes its ride time north of 15 minutes. This is extra unfortunate, given that Dreamcatcher serves some of my personal favorite terrain in canyons. Directly off of Alpenglow and Twilight are Spectre and Fool's Paradise. These 2 areas consist of several cut lines that have moguls along with lots of solid tree skiing to duck into. Just be aware that in the bottom of the pod, you can accidentally find yourself in some small thickets, so keep an eye out way ahead. Directly under the lift towards the top is Chimera. This run tends to keep some really good snow because it's shaded by tall trees on both sides. It is a mogul run, but is exceedingly steep and would in all likelihood be rated as a double black and many other mountains. There is some expert-only tree skiing on either side of Chimera as well. Phantasm, Boogeyman, and Pipe Dream all get rotating grooming, although Boogeyman seems to get it the most frequently. When groomed, these are great long cruisers that are pretty steep in their upper portions. Even a few days removed from fresh cord, Phantasm still typically skis well. The same cannot be said for Pipe Dream, however, as it gets lots of sun and as a result gets quite icy. I wouldn't recommend Pipe Dream except for when it's gotten groomed overnight. Pipe Dream does have one semi-steep pitch, but when groomed, it's definitely the easiest of these 3. At the summit of Dreamcatcher and Dreamscape is Cloud 9, which is a great less busy spot to grab some lunch or simply take a break. Off the backside of this summit is some of the quietest terrain in all of Park City. With the exception of Bugle Ridge, all routes here start by heading down Upper Trance, which is a moderately pitched road. Off the skier's left side is a precipitously pitched face with small patches of trees here and there. This is Shadowlands, and it's honestly more of a double black than a single to me. Once you get to the bottom of Upper Trance, you'll have the option to take a left onto Sandman. Do it. While Sandman isn't the steepest run in the world, Trance quickly becomes quite flat, so it's best reserved solely for real estate access. When you get to the bottom of these runs, you'll have to take the Flatiron Double, the only double chair on the canyon side. Unfortunately, to lap this terrain it is 2 lifts, requiring both Flatiron and Dreamcatcher. Flatiron seats are incredibly uncomfortable for some reason, but thankfully it's not too long of a ride. It has 2 mid-stations, either of which you can unload at if you want to head back to Dreamcatcher. At the end of Flatiron, you'll have access to the Quicksilver Gondola. This is how you get to the Park City side. So to review, the fastest way to get to the Park City side is to take any of the 3 out-of-base lifts, get to Timberline, and then take Iron Mountain, just the same as if you wanted to go to Cloud 9 as we discussed earlier. The other method is Tombstone to Peak 5 to Dreamscape to Flatiron, and while this is the more scenic route, it takes significantly longer. Quicksilver has a pretty low capacity, so it can see some solid buildup on peak days in the early morning and late afternoon. If you're going on a weekend or holiday, I would highly recommend picking one side to ski for the whole day and starting and ending your day on that side. If you're staying in the village, however, you'll just have to deal with the lines. Do recall that you have the option to take a bus between the two base areas as well. If you want to go to the Park City side from canyons, you're going to want to ride all the way across, lest you'll have to ski some pretty steep double black terrain we discussed in Part B. Coming the other way, however, you can unload at this mid-station to access a handful of blue cruisers. Both Blaze's Way and the Highway are great blues for their upper two-thirds, but both get pretty flat towards the bottom because they go around a pond. If you take a left off Blaze's Way onto Snow Wonder, however, you'll be able to have a nice continuous cruiser all the way down. Mimi's Way goes from the highway to Blaze's Way and serves no purpose other than real estate access. From Blaze's Way, Mimi's actually continues into this closed area on the map as real estate access. However, there is no sign telling you this, and it is instead signed just like every other intersection at the mountain. If you turn onto Mimi's from Blaze's, you will end up at the wrong end of Flatiron and will have to ride it back across. Just don't turn onto Mimi's. Higher up off Blaze's is an access gate to a trail network that serves the local real estate, but there are plenty of warning signs here. White Pine, Golden Spruce, and Snow Wonder, all of which are extremely mellow, bring you down to this big steep icy face into the Dreamcatcher bottom terminal. You can go around it via a road here, signed as Cascade. At the Dreamcatcher bottom, you can choose to continue to Timberline or Iron Mountain via the Cascade Trail. If you're coming from the Park City side and wanting to get to the main canyon side as fast as possible, this will be your route. Any of these cruisers to Cascade to Timberline. The final pod we have to discuss here is Iron Mountain, which is typically a fairly quiet pod in comparison to some of the other areas at canyons. Most people use this lift just to get to Quicksilver, but it has some very solid skiing in its own right. Lines here tend to mirror Dreamcatcher and Dreamscape. This is one of two themed lifts at canyons, the other being OBX, as Iron Mountain sports orange on orange terminals and some gorgeous orange seat cushions. As far as trails go, Mercury and Copperhead are the two consistently groomed runs. Mercury is a pretty standard cruiser, albeit nice and long and empty. Copperhead, however, has lots of flat spots and is thus not my favorite. Silver Streak is extremely sun exposed on its bottom half, leading to it being closed for large portions of the season. Even when it is open, it typically has poor coverage, so I avoid it as well. Double Nickel and Lead Foot are where it gets interesting, as they don't get groomed every night. Sometimes Double Nickel will even have some moguls. These are great runs to first work on some ungroomed stuff. Iron Man is the lift line and has some nice moguls, while Heavy Metal is pretty commonly groomed and is only black because of its pitch. All of these runs come together into one big wide runout, which then splits again lower down. The skier's left path, despite looking flatter, is my preferred route, as it is much wider and has way better snow. The skier's right side, overwhelmingly more popular, is quite narrow and gets extremely icy. Cobalt Woods and Platinum Woods are pretty low in elevation and can thus have semi-scarce coverage. There are better trees elsewhere. Finally, to leave the pod, you can take the excruciatingly flat Upper White Pine, the super sun-exposed and icy Tin Cup, or, the most popular option, the Chrome Alley Road. Additionally, you've got Goldfinger, which is a mogul run, but it also gets lots of sun and is a skip for me. Alright, that about wraps it up for Park City. Now go check out another episode of Insider's Guide, all about other great ski areas around the world. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.